Tonight, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine that every limitation that has held you back is suddenly nothing more than a story you once believed. Imagine that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a mountain, but a decision. Because the truth is, the difference between people who dream and people who build, people who wish and people who win, comes down to one secret. One. And when you understand it, not intellectually but emotionally, you stop negotiating with your doubts and start commanding your future. The first secret to massive action is not motivation, it's not willpower, and it's not waiting for the perfect moment. It's clarity. Deep, undeniable clarity that grabs your nervous system and says, this is who I am, this is what I must do, and nothing else is acceptable. When you reach that level of certainty, action stops being optional. It becomes automatic. It becomes a force. It becomes your new standard. And by the end of tonight, you won't just understand that secret. You'll feel it in your body, in your breath, in your identity. Because once you do, massive action won't be something you try. It will be something you live. Clarity is the ignition source because it transforms vague desires into a compelling internal command that your mind and body can't ignore. Most people say they want success, growth, or change, but they've never taken the time to define what that actually looks like in vivid, sensory-rich detail. Without that, the brain has nothing specific to target, nothing to commit to, and nothing to measure progress against. Clarity turns the abstract into something tangible. When you know exactly what you want, why you want it, and what it will feel like when you achieve it, you create emotional gravity, a pull strong enough to override excuses, distractions, and the fears that normally hold you back. The human nervous system responds not to hopes, but to direction. It needs a destination the same way a rocket needs coordinates. Once those coordinates are locked in, every decision becomes easier because everything either aligns with the vision or pulls you away from it. This simplifies life and accelerates progress. Clarity is also what creates emotional intensity, and emotional intensity is the fuel behind massive action. When your vision is blurry, you will hesitate because uncertainty signals danger to your brain. But when your vision is sharp enough that you can see it, hear it, feel it, and almost touch it, the brain receives a signal of certainty. And certainty is what allows you to move forward with power, even when the path isn't perfect. Clarity doesn't mean you know every step. It doesn't require a flawless plan. It simply gives you a compelling future that demands movement. It builds a standard you can't turn away from. When you're clear, you stop operating from survival and start operating from purpose. Another essential part of clarity is emotional leverage. It's not enough to know what you want, you must also attach meaning to it. When the reason is strong enough, the action becomes natural. Clarity connects your goals to your identity and your identity to your behaviors. You begin acting not because you have to, but because you're becoming the type of person who lives at that level. You don't chase discipline, you embody alignment. Clarity strips away doubt because doubt only thrives in confusion. The moment you illuminate your vision, hesitation loses its power. Clarity is the starting point of transformation. It is the spark, the map, the compass, and the emotional engine that turns a decision into momentum and momentum into massive action. State shapes behavior because every action you take is filtered through the emotional and physiological condition you're in at any given moment. People often believe that their decisions come purely from logic, but in reality, your state determines what options you can even see. When you're energized, confident, and centered, you take bold steps, think creatively, and access the part of your mind that can solve problems and move forward. But when your state collapses, when you're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or fearful, you shrink your world. You hesitate. You second guess. You default to the familiar, even when the familiar is what has kept you stuck. This is why two people with the same knowledge, same skills, and same opportunities can produce completely different results. The difference isn't intelligence or talent. It's the state they live in. Your state is created by your focus, your physiology, and your language. Change any one of them and the entire emotional experience of the moment shifts. When you direct your focus toward possibility instead of fear, your nervous system opens up. When you change your body, your posture, your breath, your movement, you send your brain signals of strength instead of signals of danger. When you shift your internal dialogue from doubt to certainty, you rewrite the emotional script guiding your behavior. Most people wait for the right state to appear before taking action, but high performers do the opposite. They generate the state that leads to action. They understand that their state is not something to react to, but something to command. Massive action doesn't come from sitting still, thinking harder, or hoping motivation magically arrives. It comes from shifting into a state where action feels natural, obvious, and inevitable. When you're in a powerful state, you don't have to push yourself. You're pulled forward by momentum. Your brain stops searching for what might go wrong and starts searching for what needs to happen next. Decisions become faster. Courage becomes accessible. Creativity becomes abundant. Your state is your foundation. You can have the clearest vision in the world, but if you're stuck in a disempowering state, you won't act on it. Conversely, even an imperfect vision can gain incredible traction when paired with a state of certainty. This is why mastering your state is essential to mastering your life. When you learn to shift your focus, use your physiology, and speak to yourself in a way that ignites strength instead of fear, you unlock a version of yourself capable of taking immediate, consistent, and massive action. Leverage creates urgency, because without it, most people float through life, hoping things will work out rather than demanding they do. Leverage is the pressure you place on yourself to act, the consequences that make inaction costly, and the rewards that make action irresistible. Most people try to take action in a vacuum. They set goals, make plans, and wait for motivation to arrive. But without leverage, motivation is fleeting and easy to ignore. Leverage is what turns intention into movement. It's the internal and external forces that make an action feel riskier than taking a step forward. When you truly feel the weight of what's at stake, hesitation disappears and massive action becomes non-negotiable. There are several forms of leverage. One is emotional leverage, connecting your goals to something you care about at the deepest level. When the outcome matters profoundly to your life, your relationships, or your sense of self, it triggers a visceral response that pushes you into action. Another form is accountability, creating structures that force you to act because others are watching or depending on you. Social pressure, deadlines, and commitments are powerful tools because humans are wired to avoid loss of status and the discomfort of letting others down. Then there's consequence-based leverage, clearly understanding the cost of not acting. When you make the consequences real, immediate, and unavoidable, your brain shifts from a passive observer to a high-alert problem solver, actively searching for ways to overcome obstacles and take the next step. Leverage amplifies focus. When the stakes are high, your brain prioritizes what matters, cuts through distractions, and channels energy towards solving problems that lead to results. It turns vague intentions into laser-sharp action. People often fail not because they lack talent or ideas, but because the urgency is missing. Leverage creates that urgency. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth. Staying where you are comes at a cost that is unacceptable. This shift in perspective moves you out of procrastination, hesitation, and self-doubt and into decisive, high-energy action. When you combine leverage with clarity and a strong state, you create a formula that is nearly unstoppable. Clarity tells you what you want, state energizes your system to act, and leverage ensures that doing nothing is no longer an option. Suddenly, excuses company lapse, resistance fades, and momentum begins to build. Every choice, every action, every step forward compounds, creating a trajectory toward results that once felt impossible. Understanding how to generate leverage in your life is one of the most powerful tools for converting thought into massive, unstoppable action. Identity drives consistency because the actions you take are ultimately a reflection of who you believe you are. Most people approach goals by trying to force behavior through motivation, discipline, or willpower, but these methods are temporary and fragile. What lasts, what becomes automatic, is when your behavior aligns with your identity, the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you stand for, and what kind of person takes action in the world. When you see yourself as someone who acts decisively, solves problems, and embraces challenges, the behaviors that match that identity naturally follow. You don't have to constantly push. You simply behave in ways that are congruent with your self-image. Conversely, if your identity is misaligned with your goals, no amount of effort will produce lasting results because you are working against the very person you believe yourself to be. Shifting identity is more than just saying affirmations or thinking positively. It's about creating experiences that reinforce the version of yourself you want to embody. Every choice, every action, every small victory shapes your self-concept. When you consistently act in alignment with your desired identity, the brain integrates these actions as evidence that this is who you are, strengthening the internal narrative that drives behavior. Over time, this produces automatic consistency. You stop negotiating with yourself, stop relying on fleeting motivation, and instead operate from a foundation of certainty. The question no longer becomes, should I act? But what, whoa, old the person I am becoming do right now? This subtle shift changes everything, because action becomes an expression of identity rather than a forced effort. Identity also connects to long-term perseverance. When your goals are tied to your self-image, obstacles no longer feel like deterrents. They become opportunities to reinforce who you are. Setbacks are reframed as evidence that you are learning, adapting, and moving in alignment with your deeper self. This mindset produces resilience and keeps you taking action even when conditions are difficult. People who operate from a purely external motivation, money, status, or approval, often falter because these incentives are situational and can be removed. Identity, however, is internal and self-reinforcing. Once your actions are a reflection of your identity, you no longer need external motivation to sustain momentum. The behaviors required to achieve your goals are embedded into who you are. When you intentionally cultivate an identity that supports massive action, every decision becomes easier, every habit becomes automatic, and every step forward compounds. The alignment between identity and behavior transforms inconsistency into reliability, uncertainty into confidence, and hesitation into forward movement. Momentum is created, not found, because action doesn't appear magically. It is built through deliberate, consistent steps that compound over time. Most people wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect level of energy before they move, and as a result, they remain stuck in indecision. Momentum isn't discovered, it's engineered. It starts with a single intentional action that propels you forward, no matter how small. That first step creates a ripple effect, and each subsequent action builds on the previous one, generating speed, energy, and confidence that carry you beyond what you thought was possible. Momentum transforms effort into force and inertia into unstoppable movement. The key is understanding that even imperfect action produces results. And results, when noticed and celebrated, create feedback that fuels more action. Momentum is also about the psychology of motion. Your mind and body respond to movement. When you take action, even in the face of fear or uncertainty, you signal to your nervous system that progress is happening, which triggers energy, focus, and clarity. Conversely, inaction breeds stagnation, doubt, and procrastination. The longer you wait to move, the harder it becomes to start, because hesitation accumulates, creating resistance that feels heavier than it actually is. Momentum breaks that cycle. Once you're moving, the effort required to continue diminishes, because action itself produces the motivation to keep going. This is why high performers emphasize starting before you feel ready. They understand that the act of moving generates the force that carries them through challenges, obstacles, and uncertainty. Another essential component of creating momentum is consistency. Momentum isn't a one-time event. It is the product of repeated, focused actions aligned with your goals. Small intentional steps may feel insignificant at first, but they compound exponentially. Each action reinforces the next, builds confidence, and creates patterns of behavior that become automatic. Momentum doesn't require perfection, it requires persistence. It requires making a decision to keep moving, even when progress feels slow or invisible. The accumulation of these small victories produces a force that is greater than the sum of its parts, and eventually momentum becomes a self-sustaining engine, pulling you forward toward results you never thought possible. Creating momentum also involves managing energy, focus, and leverage in tandem. Clarity provides direction. State energizes your system, and leverage creates urgency. Momentum is the culmination of these elements working together. When you understand that momentum is built through deliberate, consistent action, rather than waiting for inspiration, you gain control over your trajectory. You become the architect of your forward motion rather than a passenger hoping circumstances will push you along.